there's a misconception that homelessness is generally from mental instability or our war veterans. Totally untrue. Homelessness comes in all shapes, forms, and colors. It can happen from a family that had two working parents and one parent lost their job, hours were cut off. It could be where the breadwinner in the family died, divorce, change of states, moving from city to city. It could be cut back in hours.
Homelessness also is caused by many things, not just by financial issues. One of the largest, most severe cause of homelessness in families is domestic violence, and the trauma to children from that have become homeless through domestic violence is compounded because not only have they experienced the violence and the loss and the fear of living in a domestic violence situation, but then they are removed from their home by the usually by the victim, and they usually leave without any of their possessions. So they don't have the comfort of going back to their bed and having their favorite stuffed animal, or if they just got a bicycle that Christmas, they lose everything. They lose their home, they lose their family, they lose the relationship they have with the abusive parent. They lose everything, and then they're thrown in usually in domestic violence shelters, which are often confidential, which means they can't contact anyone in their life. And many times they can actually even remain in their school of origin, not because the school won't allow them, but because it is unsafe for them. So, and then we have the parent who is, battered emotionally and physically, and therefore is not also highly functional at the moment. So the child really has no support at all. None of their regular nets can catch them because they've all been removed. And the other reason is with the situation for children with and homelessness is that because it is often not a 2 or 3 month or 6 month situation, but is often a long process, and it's a cycle that sometimes it appears to end and it falls right back because the parent either does not have either through mental illness or chemical addiction, does not have really enough of the ability to sustain if they do end up receiving permanent housing, like if they're able to move up in the Section 8 wait list and are able to afford an apartment. Sometimes they cannot afford to pay the 30%, and they can't sustain it. Or if they're back finally at home, having have all their needs met at the shelter, right? They didn't have to pay for electricity, utilities. There was no other demand of them than to follow the program rules. Now they're moving to their own apartment. For one thing, they don't have anything, so there's no furniture, there's no pots, pans, there's nothing like that. And then they become an adult with all the demands of an adult life, so they have to contact the utilities to get their services started. They have to be able to budget their money. They have to be able to do all of these things. And the truth is that many times that is just not something they can handle. And so they lose their housing again. The children go back to being homeless. And the emotional impact of that in children and the way that impacts their learning is really profound because emotionally they begin to lose their ability to form attachments. They constantly lose their friends. They constantly lose whatever other supportive adults they may have had in one shelter as they move to another, or and so they're no longer able to trust. They're no longer able to connect. They actually refuse to do that because it becomes emotionally unbearable for them to lose so much all the time. Yeah, and they have no control. Talk about, I mean, a child in a room, normally children don't have a lot of control over their lives, but at least they can tell their little sister or brother, don't come into my room, right? Or don't jump on my bed. They have nothing. When you're homeless, you are always at the whim of somebody else. And, sometimes, yes, they are able to, let's say, stay in the school of origin, which is truly, as Jeannie has mentioned, the one consistent part of their world. But as the parent has to have the children help them move whatever possessions they can carry, if you're considering a bag full of clothing or a book bag, a backpack, they're going to take the bag of clothing, as they should. And so they lose their homework, they lose their books, they lose whatever little thank you or goodbye cards they were given at the previous school. They lose little bits of their life every single day and every single change. And the way that translates into school is that when a child does not feel safe, they cannot stop worrying. And if you can't stop worrying, your brain is using its energy to worry. So they can really pay attention. They can't focus on the task at hand. They can't listen to the teacher. They can't handle any kind of distraction in the classroom. If another student, yells for joy because they just got the right answer, for this particular child who's been in fear all night long, thinking, with noises or screams in the shelter, that one last loud noise means that their whole day just dissolved in, tears or aggression. So it really is a very significant problem for entire communities, because we are raising children who will no longer, as adults, may not be able to really function properly. There's some things you have to experience to learn, and if you don't have them, you can improvise later on.
Without the interruption and without the barriers that would stop them having to move to a different district. So if their family loses a home, that child, instead of having to change schools, has the right to remain in the school of origin or to attend a school, be immediately admitted to a school in the attendance area where they are living, as to not interrupt their education, because studies have shown that, whenever a child moves, they go 4 to 6 months behind in their education. So the idea is to make sure they're provided equal services, including transportation services, meal free and reduced lunch services. They also have we have access to funding to provide clothing, shoes, and other resources, just to ensure that that child is able to reach their full potential in education.
With the McKinney-Vento Act, it allows for one homeless liaison per school district. But because we are already in the schools through the Communities in Schools program, they designated each of us to be homeless liaisons within the schools. We each have 2 or 3 schools. So a new student coming into the school district, they could contact either the school district liaison or the liaisons within each of the schools. If a family came into the district not knowing that they were part of the McKinney-Vento Act, then we would hopefully recognize them as being such when they come in and register in the schools.
One family last year, this family lost their employment, lost their home, and within a matter of 6 months, this family moved 4 times, to within Renton, up to Everett for about 3 weeks, to a shelter in Seattle, and then to transitional housing in Tukwila, all within 6 months. That was 4 different school districts. Due to McKinney-Vento Act, the children were able to continue at one school. The family moved 4 different times by bus. They did not have a vehicle of their own. And school was the one stable place for this family. When we talk about homelessness, one of the things that we do is we need to discuss with the family and find out what their nighttime resident is. Is it fixed? Is it regular? Is it adequate? This can involve anything from living in their car to shelters, transitional housing, or being in a doubled up situation.
Oftentimes, when a family is in a homeless situation or goes homeless, there is a lot of embarrassment, fear attached that the children are going to be taken away. They're feeling very unsafe. So they want to keep it under the table, so to speak. The truth of the matter is, as soon as we find out, we reach out to the family and try to provide as many support services as we can, whether it be perhaps transportation for that the child can stay in the school of origin. The school is oftentimes the only stability in that child's life at this point. Perhaps the family is sleeping in their car, moving from parking lot to parking lot, or couch surfing. And the school is, they're familiar, they're comfortable, they're guaranteed to have food and meals. Oftentimes, because the families are embarrassed of the situation, they go low radar. They do not want to be identified. They don't want the school to know. They don't want anyone to know. So we're brought in with referrals where we have a child that is perhaps sleeping in class. They're dressed inappropriately. They're hoarding food. They won't release their personal objects because when you're homeless, your things seem to disappear, and they have a fear of not having ever get it back again. So there's lots of signs that are out there. And with our staff, we work together with our teachers and the whole entire staff in a school, whether it be all the way from the custodian up to the principal. And we listen to them and appreciate their eyes and their voices. And at this point, when we get identified that there's a possibility of a homeless child, we do an assessment to search and separate the facts, so to speak. And at this point, when it is determined that a child is homeless, we go for basic. And the first one is to get the child stabilized in school with the transportation issue. And when at all possible, the districts will work together to provide transportation for that child can stay in the actual school of origin, which is the first major concern. When they're at school, oftentimes they're scared, so they're scared, they're emotional, they're shut down, they don't want to do their schoolwork, they can have behavior issues, oftentimes there's many emotional issues. So we look at counseling, first of all, to get them connected to a counselor. And all the services, I would like to say, are not done with judgment. They're done with support, and we're glad that we are here for that family. The counselor will come in, do the emotional checks. Oftentimes there's academics that are lacking because when a family's homeless, to say, so I have a family that's been living under a bridge. The teacher doesn't necessarily know that. So when this child goes home to the bridge, where do they do their homework? What computer do they look at? What book do they have to open? What pencils and supplies? So the whole, it's a very lopsided situation for this particular child. So we look at academically whether they need some additional services put into place. Food, of course, is another issue. When you're homeless, you don't have a microwave, you don't have a stove. So trying to get food for the family that they can actually use and utilize in their particular situation. Definitely making sure that this child has food in the morning for breakfast and food for lunch, what we call free and reduce. We also want to make sure that they have clothes that are appropriate. Oftentimes we have children that are coming to school when it was in the teen, well, we didn't get the teen weather this year, but when it was in the 30s, they're wearing a fleece cover-up. They don't have a jacket. They don't have hats. They don't have the gloves. We try to get those things in place for them immediately. We're also very fortunate that we have, at this second in time, an abundance of school supplies. We make sure they have their basic supplies. Again, when a family's in a homeless situation, there's so many other things that the parents are trying to take care of or make happen that in the educational world, that binder and paper and pencil is a mandatory must. For the parent that is trying to survive and fear for their lives at night, that binder and paper and pencil really doesn't have a lot of value. There's 3 types of housing. There's emergency shelters, which can be 3 days to 90 days. There's transitional housing, which is you're under a program which can vary from type to type to type. That's generally up to approximately 24 months, and there's going to be lots of other requirements that are required of the family, whether it be attending, if it has a religious connotation, they may have to attend church on Sundays, they may have to have their child in tutoring, they may have to go to financial planning, et cetera, et cetera. If they do not meet any of those criterias, they are removed from the program. That's why, even though they're in a transitional housing situation, the family is still considered homeless. A factor, or not a factor, but a fact that people are not aware of. Many of our transitional housing, our emergency shelters, will not take the male child from the age 12 and up. They have to go into the men's shelter. So you have a family that can have, I had a family that had, there's 3 children, 2 males, the oldest male was 14 or 15. We were able to find housing for the 2 children, but the older son they were being told they had to release him to the men's shelter. That is my family that chose to stay under a bridge. And the truth of the matter is, as a parent, I too can understand not wanting to break up my family component. There's obstacles in front of families that are horrendous, that we don't think about at all. Where do they shower? Where do you get your cleaning supplies? Those are things that you don't really think about. They're huge. They're major. When they're homeless, how do they get to school on time? Most families have a clock at home. It's just lots. It's a very you broach the family very gently, with a lot of respect and kindness, with empathy and sympathy. And you let them know that it's okay. Well over 300 families that we have identified last year. We identify up to the last day of school to put services into place. People don't want to be identified because, again, of the fear factor. They want to stay under the low radar. They're really afraid of CPS coming after them. The whole stigma of being bad parents, you failed, failure as a parent, as an adult. It's just a very broad field that is attacked with homelessness. Something that we don't think about also is when the child's in school, how does this really affect all of us? When our children are in the classroom and you have a teacher that is addressing her class, and you have a child that is lethargic or not sleeping or acting out, that is a domino effect onto the rest of the class also, because she is trying to lead and teach and guide, and part of her is trying to figure out what's going on with this child.
One of the problems we face when families come to us is housing resources. And I don't know if it's because of the new economy, what's been occurring, but they come to us, and there's kind of a process for families to get into shelters and things. And for instance, I had a family come in. We worked on getting them into an emergency shelter for 4 weeks. And the process includes calling each shelter daily to see if a space opens up. With this particular family, like I said, it took 4 weeks for them to even find a space in an emergency shelter. To get into the shelters, it depends. Some of them are just for men, some of them are just for women, and very few of them are family-oriented. So that makes it twice as hard. Once they get into the shelter, they usually are sent on to transitional housing. The sheltering, emergency shelter, as stated before, was like from 0 to 3 months. Transitional housing is more, they can go up to 2 years in some places, which is just wonderful because it finally gives them some stability to work on all the other issues that got them into being homeless in the first place. But it is a long process. It's the rare person that can continue through that process. The emergency shelters that we have in the King County area tend to be in Seattle. We've got some good up north and in the east. But like in Bellevue, but down south in South King County, we're really lacking in good family shelters. There are many rules they have to follow. A lot of these homeless families are not ready to follow those rules, and they do get kicked out. And once you're kicked out of a shelter, you can't go back to it. In talking with them and having conversations about how they sleep and where they sleep, many of the children have never, ever had a bed. They have always slept under the table, in the dining room table, or they've slept on the couches, in chairs. They've never had their own bed because they share with 3 other children. It's just hard to imagine never having your own pillow or your own blanket. But they go from environment to environment where the rules are always different and the people are always different. And a lot of times these children are brought into situations that are unsafe. They're safe with their mom, but then they move into an apartment where there is domestic violence, or where they are exposed to possibly child abusers. And these parents, they love their children and they want to keep them safe. And so the minute they find out that that situation is not safe, they move.
I worked a couple of years ago with a student out of one of our high schools, and he was considered an unaccompanied youth, meaning not with a guardian parent. This young person was couch surfing. Turns out the young man in his couch surfing received ringworm. He had no medical. A misconception to many is that the under 18-year-old cannot get DSHS support. They can. If you have a child that's hungry, oftentimes you're having siblings that are hungry. You have parents that are hungry. If the parents are hungry, if the parents are ill, if the parents don't have winter coats, it's very difficult to provide for their child. To provide, to have the energy to go to DSHS, to look for housing, to make the call after call after call after call, to hear the no's and the no's, and to keep going to find that resiliency within themselves. And yet, when that child comes home after school, to be welcoming and strong and act as if they are in command when they don't feel it.
So one of the most difficult things that I find myself having to do when talking with the parents of homeless families is I have to, after being empathetic with them and hearing, their story and their pain and their worries, and just feeling overwhelmed with them because it is so much that they have to deal with. I then find myself having to gently but firmly bring them into reality, because I need to prepare them for the fact that once they have become homeless for whatever reason, it is a very difficult and lengthy process to get out of. And they have to, in the midst of having their own mental issues or their own loss or their own grieving or their own anger or their own depression or their own whatever, and they're having to take care of the children, they have to deal with the practical steps that they need to take in order to be able to secure shelter for that night or for a week or for a month. So they have to call every day. They have to keep lists. They have to know which places will take actually your name and number to call you back, and which ones will absolutely not keep a wait list because it's only whatever is available that they will take your name. Otherwise, your call goes into nothing. And so to be able to provide them with a binder or a folder and a line paper and a pen, and helping them kind of practice from calling from my office. So this is what you will do. These are the questions you will do. And this is how you need to say your name clearly, and make sure you have a number, a working number from which they can call you back. If there are domestic violence issues, make sure that you state in the message you leave that it is a safe number. Otherwise, even if they have a space for you, they will not call you back. There are all these little practical step-by-step things that I need to help them focus on, that I know for a fact is not what they want to do. That is not what they want to spend whatever little energy they have left, but it is sometimes painful to do it, because I know that if I don't give them those tools, their efforts are going to be that much more frustrating and that much more not successful. And many times I have seen parents who have already been in the second or third bout of homelessness. And so they're really hardened. They seem emotionally flat. Nothing touches them, nothing breaks them, nothing hurts them anymore. And I told a parent that I had this year that was like that. I said, I have to tell you that I truly admire your strength, because I don't know that I could have been able to sustain all the loss that you have sustained, and to continue to advocate for your children, and to continue to, try to make a home life for them, and hold them accountable, and demand that they do well in school, and demand that they are, to still have some sort of family routine. It's amazing to me that you can do that. And I really want you to know that I find that it's an admirable thing. And this hardened parent just broke into tears, because I think it was the first time that an adult had looked at her as a successful adult. Even though she had lost everything. She had lost her career, her home, her marriage, everything. Yet, truly, she was surviving with those children, and she was holding them together. And there cannot be any better success than that.
As I stroll into this land, I turn my life around. Yes, from give to take, it takes to give. It's give to take. I wanna live, 'cause I believe in this life and what it has. I believe in what's right, so take it back.